So here's one of Konami's most popular video game franchises of all time, which has been around since the 80s. And the last major game that I've seen out of the franchise, at least to my knowledge, was Lords of the Shadow 2, which I believe came out in the mid teens and like hardly anyone knows about it. No one's really played it. And for the most part, people who have played it said it wasn't really any good. And when you look at the older Castlevania games, like the best stuff came out of like the 80s and the 90s, and probably the best Castlevania game of all time, depending on who you ask, was Symphony of the Night, which came out back in '97, and I believe it came out for Sega Saturn and PlayStation, if I'm not mistaken. But Symphony of the Night was probably the best installment in the entire series, and it's a game that people have been wanting to see a remake for quite some time, and I'm shocked that Konami has not. Um, they have not acknowledged the fact that fans want to see it, or they haven't made any plans on actually remaking it. And don't get me wrong, there are other games from the past I love a lot of people would like to see remade from the Castlevania series, like Dracula's Curse, which was the third Castlevania game, I believe, on the NES. You got Super Castlevania 4, you got Rondo of Blood, you have Dracula X. You have the two games that came out on Game Boy Advance, Aria of Sorrow and Circle of the Moon. But when you look at the Castlevania game that people want to see remade the most, Symphony of the Night fits the bill. And the reason I say that is because you look at that game, Symphony of the Night, it was very different than like any of the other games that we got. And I believe that was the game where you can transform or shape shift into different animals in order to get through different levels and all that stuff. And and honestly, like a lot of people feel like the Castlevania series kind of it started to kind of decline in popularity after Dracula was destroyed. And at least that seems to be the case for the animated series because that's something I've actually been watching recently. Right now, I'm like on season three, but it seems like it's gotten kind of boring ever since Dracula and Godbrand got killed off, and the Castlevania anime for Netflix, to be honest, was a lot better than I thought. I definitely feel like Dracula died like too soon in that, but either way, it's way better than I thought it would be. I'm still trying to get through it. And obviously, the anime doesn't necessarily follow the video game series too closely because in the anime, Alucard's the one that kills his father, Dracula. But in Super Castlevania, like four, or I believe it was either four or in Castlevania 3, Christopher Belmont had killed Dracula, and I believe the anime focuses more on Trevor Belmont, focuses on one of the Belmonts, and it's still fun to watch. And it's a damn shame that it's not on like Cartoon Network or anything like that, or it wasn't on it at the time. But for the most part, I feel like the Castlevania series, I'm not going to say it's necessarily dead, but it seems like the best games and all that stuff is like way in the past, like in the 80s and the 90s and even the early 2000s to some extent. And Konami should totally like remake more Castlevania games because I feel like making a brand new um, entry in the series is something that's not going to do it any good because I feel like it's similar to that of Resident Evil where like as the series go on, people become less interested in it, even though like the sales are good. A lot of the best stuff in Resident Evil series came in the past with like Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then after 4, it was like a drop off in terms of popularity, and um, it wasn't as popular on a mainstream level anymore. And for the most part, Castlevania is something that I feel should have been a lot more popular than it became. It should have been bigger than what it became. Um, the whole medieval vibe, the storytelling, and how dark it is and everything. All those things, add to the appeal of Castlevania as a series. And in terms of like remakes and stuff like that, I wouldn't mind seeing Castlevania Symphony of the Night remade for modern day game consoles like PlayStation 5, the Xbox Series X, or the Switch 2 once it comes out. Using graphics and stuff like that, similar to what you see nowadays in Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. A lot of people would love to see Konami remake one of the older Castlevania games, but I do feel that if we all had a choice in terms of picking which one Konami should remake the most, the game from '97 would be the one, and hopefully it's something that Konami would consider because I feel like at this point it's been at least like I would say it was at least like 25 years or something like that since that game was released, and and this is a game that should have gotten a remake at least a decade ago. But I don't think Konami's too big on remaking old games. Hopefully, they'll make an exception with Symphony of the Night sometime in the future.